was meaning to talk to you about that, actually. The tension is building. Oh, yeah. I'm so excited. It's going to be great. Welcome to Final Gravity, the show where we take evaluation to a whole new level beyond judging. We evaluate recipe to glass. This is not a style show, it's a your beer show. Unlike blind judging, Brandon Martin and James Alon will evaluate your beer alongside your recipe and process. Based on what you wanted to brew, we'll provide perception, feedback, and a little unsolicited advice.
All right, we're going to have some fun today.
Yes, sir.
One of the funnest things is, guess what? We're drinking my beers.
That's right. We're going to go a little bit off track of our normal formula here because we've got something really interesting to talk about. We have a yeast company from Texas here, from San Antonio, that came to our local homebrew club meeting recently with some locally cultured yeasts and had some really interesting stuff to offer. And James Beerweenie got all excited, and so we're going to go where it leads us.
Yeah, it's rare for something new to come out that just gets me super excited. And Rob and Mara from Community Cultures down in San Antonio were gracious enough to come up and join our meeting and talk about their yeast and field a whole ton of questions. I was amazingly impressed with their ability to field the questions from homebrewers and the beer geeks and go back and forth and question what they're doing. And they came back at us. They did a fantastic job, really giving lots of backstories of what their yeast are doing, and their story is very interesting. They have microbiologists. They take the geekness way to a new level because they're going out and taking swabs from various areas right now, mostly in Texas, Big Bend area, Houston area, and expanding to other areas throughout Texas. And who knows where they may take these swabs, because Saccharomyces lives everywhere. It's all over everything, so you never know what you're going to get. But when you take a swab and then you go all the way down to that single cell and then rebuild it back up, you never know if that Saccharomyces strain is going to be worth anything.
Yeah, one of the biggest things about that, and you hear a lot about people trying to gather wild yeast out under their peach tree or something like that. And the Saccharomyces strains are out there, but they're not all alcohol tolerant.
Yes.
And that's the big thing of isolating the ones that are alcohol tolerant and can actually be used for brewing. So I want to just kind of read off of their webpage here how they describe themselves. It says, "We're a family-owned business whose love story started in the great outdoors. As proud San Antonians, we started first by backpacking, hiking, and kayaking the diverse Texas countryside, and began collecting native yeast strains along the way. After cultivating over 80 pure yeast cultures and rigorously testing for multiple applications, we set out to provide the freshest, most unique, and regionally seasonal, diverse brewers' yeast to our local brewery and distilling community. In the literal meaning, we sell yeast cultures. Figuratively, we are bringing the culture, traditions, and unique flavor profiles from regions around the world captured from yeast to be expressed and used creatively in food and drinks." So this is truly a labor of love, really, it sounds like.
Oh, it absolutely is, both from a beer standpoint, but just from also a chemistry standpoint. And what they're doing that's so different than those that are going out there getting wild yeast and leaving an open fermenter and on a cool fall night is they're actually isolating that single cell and then rebuilding it back up. So it is truly a pure cell. You're not getting any other kind of wild bacteria. They've done a fantastic job of that isolation, and I think that story is just tremendous to be able to go to that level. And like you said, many of their stories were about trying because they're not all alcohol tolerant. They may have a slow attenuation. If they're only going to get a 10% attenuation, then it's worthless.
Right.
And so those are some of the fun things they talked about. Low attenuation, low alcohol tolerance, and then the ones that really can produce in that 70-80% are going to be the ones that are going to be reasonable. And then also can they do 70-80% attenuation with at least a 6 or 7% alcohol just to be able to make something that's going to be viable. And so it was fascinating to me, and to get to that level and be able to field my questions was really exciting. And we have a couple other really great brewers that have won a lot of awards that were just bucking the heck out of them. And they came back. It was they gave us the story about what I told in 5 minutes. That's all. That's what they gave us, and then came back and just answered question after question after question, and gave us everything you would ever want to know. And me, my purest note to styles started to really pick up on some of their words. And so
see, and that's
fun.
what struck me is I didn't get to make this meeting. I saw the announcement on our club forum and went and looked at their site, and there were several things about what they described in terms of the styles that the yeast could be used on, that kind of thing, that kind of made me think, I'm just not sure about all of this. And then everybody I know who are some of the best brewers that I've ever known all said, man, these guys knocked it out of the park. They were really incredible. So I'm really excited to taste some of these and see what
they were.
do.
And let me also state, native cultures is one segment of their business. They do have other cultures out there that are more traditional. Their yeast lab, like many other great ones out there. So they have quite a bit out. Native is the one we're going to talk about today. We got to the end of the meeting, and after they had the opportunity to purge a little bit of their product, I sat back and said, okay, what do you got left? And they said, well, we got this. I said, no, what native strains you had left? Said they had 3 left. And so I started talking to them and having a lot of fun. And we're going to talk about those 3 styles today, because I went ahead and took them all and gave it a try.
So as you're listening here, if you want to kind of follow along with us, it's Community Cultures Yeast Lab. Their website is ccyeastlab.com. And you can go on there and read all the information about the strains we're about to talk about here.
And full disclosure, I have not tried a single one of these beers.
That's the coolest part about what we're doing here.
So the first one is their Swallowtail. As we chatted, this is one of the yeasts that they talked about a lot during our Q&A session openly. They talked about it has a apricot and a little bit of other fruit, apple pie. The style notes officially off the website, not just off the top of their head, say it's lovely fruit aromas, slightly residual sweetness with a rich peaches, apricot, apple pie, and a classic hint of spicy, peppery, and clove. And my question on this one was, how much is a slight? And they said, really, most of the time when we brew with this, we're not getting any spices. So I said, what the heck? Let's make a Kolsch out of that. And they said, nobody's done that. I said, well, let's have fun.
So one of the things that we learned from having Kevin Lane from Fermentus in here talking about when you get into talking about spices and clove flavors is that's a genetic component of the yeast. It's what they call phenolic off flavor positive or phenolic off flavor negative. So not all yeast can produce those flavors. And I think as we've gotten into dealing with some of the omega yeasts, the Javaro yeast in particular, we've found that one is capable of producing those, or there's been beers that we've had that have not had that in there. And our theory, we haven't brewed enough to test this, our theory is that if you're brewing with wheat or something like that's got a high ferulic acid content to it, that brings that spice out, where if you're not, you don't get those phenolics. Okay. And so it's possible that that's what this type of yeast is too, that given the right food to chew on, it can produce one thing or another. So that'll be interesting enough. To see.
Yeah. So I took that the note that I jumped on and highlight the most is apricot. Typically, when I think of a Kolsch, I'm looking at a little more pear. So with this one, I said, let's give it a try and see. Taking a basic Kolsch recipe, nothing but Pilsner malt, a small dose of Magnum at 60 for a 22 IBU and an original gravity of about a 1046. This one finished out very dry. in the range of about 1006, 1007.
So the notes on this are lovely fruit aromas, slight residual sweetness with rich peaches, apricot, apple pie, and classic hints of spices, pepper, and clove. The suggested use was Hefeweizen, Belgian, German ale, Double, Witbier's Saison, which covers quite a bit of ground there.
But not the Kolsch.
I'm telling you, just smelling this right off the bat, that's pretty incredible.
Yeah, I get that apricot. I get the pie, the apple notes, but I
get
do
banana.
get the spicy note. Oh, I can get some banana.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I do get the spicy notes also. And wow.
Yeah, this is not a Kolsch by any means.
Okay, so to clarify here, we're just talking about straight up Pilsner malt.
That's it.
Half ounce of Magnum at 60 minutes for 22 IBUs, 1046 original gravity. Very nice basic recipe. This really, really screams Hefeweizen to me.
And I get a lot of that. These guys, Rob and Mara, talked a lot about people doing saisons very well with this. And I'm starting to get a lot of that same characteristics. And I can see why this could fit a saison very well.
This leans towards that very much because it is just Pilsner malt. You don't have any of that protein content or any of the richness that comes from wheat that you'd normally find in Hefeweizen. So like if this was 50% Pilsner, 50% wheat, I think it would lean more towards the Hefeweizen side. But with it just being Pilsner malt and being a much lighter, more delicate malt character, the phenolics and the esters from the yeast just kind of stand out on their own. It's got a really nice peppery
Yes, it does.
kind of character to it.
Yes,
Very
it does.
similar to like the DuPont yeast,
Yeah,
I think.
I can see very much doing this, taking this one, doing it again with a much higher gravity, and including with, we've already seen it'll strip it down really, really dry, and it does a great job with that part. It's very dry, so building up to a bigger beer, and
So
maybe just
what's
doing a
crazy
straight
to me
beer.
here too is you started this at 58 degrees and raised up to 63. 63 degrees is what you fermented this at?
Yes.
And the type of rich and crazy, spicy, and complex yeast character you got out of it at 63 degrees.
Yeah, I intentionally started it extremely low, as the same way I would do with a Kolsch with a traditional German ale yeast, because
And
I
it's-
want to do what I can to keep it as
Yeah.
low on that cherry-like esters and keep it down there. But then I was going to follow it up with the next two beers. So knowing that I was going to throw those next two beers in that box, I wanted to get through the original, ester profile low. And it stayed for over 2 days below 60 before it finally got up to into the 60s, and then really started cranking it at 63.
So their optimum fermentation temperature, according to them, is 69 to 75. So you didn't even come close to the low end of what they did.
No.
And it still attenuated really well.
It went
I
through-
mean, this screams of a saison yeast to me. Even maybe diastaticus in there, because it got down to what, 1006 you said?
Yep, 1006.
At 63, so 6 degrees below the low end of the optimum fermentation
Yeah.
temperature. That's crazy. I got to tell you, I'm really blown away by this one. Right off the bat, the first one has really just blown me away because this is not what I expected.
I am super surprised as well. I'm a little giddy. The flavor profile has all of that just nice, delicate, light Pilsner malt up front. It's got just enough bitterness. The yeast is the showcase. It's all yeast.
Absolutely.
That's what showcases, and then it dries out. But it also has a nice, good medium, high medium carbonation, and a creamy mouthfeel that I think is just very enlightening.
Creamy but dry. A very
It's
dry
dry.
finish to it. Very dry finish.
Yeah.
I mean, it finishes every bit of 1005, 1006. Yeah. To me, what's really interesting is the combination of a Weizen yeast and a Saison yeast flavor
Yes.
character, because the banana is there for sure. But the first thing I smelled when I smelled it was banana. I thought this is going to taste like a Weizen.
Well, and that what makes me interested to know is, you see they talk about 67 to 75, and that may be the yeast or the temperature they're used to,
Mm-hmm.
and then me exploiting it to that level of well, wait a second. If we go low, do we bring out something completely different?
I got to think that the yeast character would be even bigger if it were warmer.
Well,
you know?
they may not have the banana.
Maybe not, yeah.
You know,
yeah.
we talk about a traditional Hefeweizen yeast. A lot of times people will go low to keep the banana and keep the clove down, go high to let the banana go down and the clove go up, just depending on personal preference. And
See, now you have a note here that says, in the meeting they discussed that a touch of pear and spices were nearly non-existent. That's an odd thing to say, you're not going to taste pear. But I taste pear.
yeah,
It's weird to say, here's what you're not going to taste, and just throw a fruit out there. You know, that's an odd thing to me. Everything about the way these guys talk about their yeast is odd to me. But there is no arguing with this result. This is a fantastic yeast.
and I think this is a wonderful yeast. It
Yeah.
brings out some fun things. I am intrigued. I'm very intrigued at going ahead and making the traditional Hefeweizen with this yeast, and I'm doing it the same way just to see if I
with
if I
some
add the
wheat in there.
because this has no
Yeah.
wheat character. That's
Right.
where it doesn't come in.
That would add some mouthfeel and add some richness to the malt. Yeah, I think with wheat in it, this would be an incredibly complex beer with some wheat in it.
The interesting note is it's got those spices that we talked about. It's got the apricot. It's got the apples, the nice, sweet, delicate apple like the apple pie, and it has none of that cherry, the typical Fruity Pebbles type cherry note that's there. So
The apple pie is a really interesting distinction too, because it is apple pie, not apple, because of the spices that are in it. It's that's really unique. I don't know if I've ever tasted anything like that before.
no, this is something very, very different. It brings out a lot of different characters.
Well, you have got one of these kegs that you've got is
Will not be lower out.
outstanding, just outstanding. What's the ABV on this? Was it like 4.5, 5?
No, 46 to 6 would be about 4.5. I was thinking it would come in lower because I expected it to stop at right about 10-10. I didn't.
I really like the low finishing gravity. I like the dryness on it.
I love it. And what really excites me is it starts off with some of that sweet malt note, so you get the malt up front, and
Just a
it
little
doesn't
bit, yeah.
it doesn't taste thin. A lot of times you get that dry.
No, you're right. It
tastes
doesn't.
thin.
Yeah, you're right.
You're losing some of those characteristics.
Well, I think because you get so much flavor from the yeast, that's why it doesn't taste thin. Because the malt by itself, it really takes a back seat to everything. Like you said, this is 100% yeast in this with just a little bit of malt propping it up.
Correct.
Wow, what an excellent beer, man.
That's fun. That was a lot of fun. And so, and I promised these guys, I said, look, I said, we're gonna do this on the show as a thank you for you to come in the club and do some intrigue. And I'm gonna send you some. So if they're listening tonight, then great, you'll get some next week. Or maybe they'll be listening and trying these same beers at the same time to see what happens. It's that's part of the fun and excitement of being able to brew these beers.
So this next one is the I don't know how to say this.
C note.
C note. Okay, C note Sac Acton. Is
That part I can't say. I just
Okay.
say C note.
If you're listening along here, make sure you go on their website and pull this up, because I know I'm just murdering the pronunciation on it. Actually, I don't even see it on the website. Is it on here?
It's down there toward the bottom. This is a yeast.
There it is. Okay.
And what
yeah.
I think we didn't, so we failed to say on the last one. The Swallowtail. Let's see, it came out of Houston. So this one came out. I remember, if I remember correctly. I apologize if I'm stating this wrong, but I believe it came out of a butterfly, basically a butterfly sanctuary in Houston that they pulled that yeast. So that yeast came out of Houston. This next one came out of Tulum, Mexico, down in the Big Bend area. Let's see, it said it came from the underground cave system, the largest underground cave system in the world. The C note Actum is a glistening freshwater cave that stretches from the Pacific all the way to the Caribbean Sea. The notes that they told me that jumped out were juicy citrus zest and lemon peel. So it said a surprisingly dry and bright, juicy citrus zest with a slightly bitter lemon peel and unripe pear. When I heard that, I said American blonde all the way. With the note of I wanted to make something that could do the same thing. produce and so showcase that yeast, and not just say I'm going to make an American Pale Ale and then kill it with hops.
So a couple of things that jump out to me here. Attenuation, 89 to 94%. That is a really high attenuation rate. If you look at attenuation rates on yeast, 94, you're not going to see that very often.
No.
So that jumps out at me. Alcohol tolerance, 5 to 10%, a little bit on the low side. A lot of these yeast, 10% is fairly low for the top end. Suggested use was East Coast IPA, New England IPA, English ales, Irish red ale, and brown ales. That is a huge range of beers that they're suggesting it for. Surprisingly dry and bright, juicy citrus zest, slightly bitter, lemon peel, and unripe pear. I've never eaten an unripe pear, so if they're not ripe, I don't need them. So
I don't want to eat them.
I don't know.
So I decided the American Blonde, but I also wanted to make it to where it could dry out on its own. I didn't want to put a lot of crystal malt, so I decided to make the base malt be the Mutton's pale malt. I just said let's use this so I can give a little bit of a color and a little bit of character without adding anything that could artificially, or not artificially, but add to the sweetness and let the yeast do what they do.
And I like that for a blonde ale. I don't like to see caramel malt in a blonde ale. If anything, maybe Crystal 10 and just a very small touch of it. But even that, I think if you use a substantial base malt like an English pale malt, that's enough. What are you getting on the aroma on this? Because I'm not getting...
It's subdued. I get
much of anything.
I get light citrus, light lemon. It's light. I don't
very, very light.
And then of course some of that pale malt. Used a Cascade at the beginning early, and that was it. One dose of Cascade at a little less or a little more than 3/4 of an ounce, 0.8 ounce of Cascade, and let it do its job. 20 IBUs. 1050, and it finished out about 108. It went all the way dry as well.
So this one again, I would say that if I had to put it in a box, I'd call it a saison yeast, because I am getting a little bit of spicy phenolics in there, and then a citrusy.
See, I get all that. I'm pretty happy with this sitting as an American Blonde, or almost pushing the pale ale, and I can see exactly why this would do fantastic for American Pale Ale. I'm getting all those citrus notes. I get it that it dried it out really well. I could do this with an IPA because I want it to be super dry.
Right. See, I think it's IPAs. One of those that the esters that it puts off, if you had hops layered on top of it, hop flavor layered on top of it, would blend right in really nicely, a lot like an American Ale 2 yeast that has some fruity esters to it.
So that was my intent here. My intent was very focused on the American Blonde, because I knew that I did not want to add late hops. I wanted to add low alpha, 6 alpha hops early, so they were low enough to where you had enough that could possibly carry through, but let the yeast do its job, and let's find out what the yeast is going to do. Because if you did this in IPA, you're going to cover up, and what the little bit of lemon, the little bit of citrus that you both get in the aroma and the flavor is going to make the overall profile more complex, but you won't necessarily
know where it came from. Right. Yeah.
Yes.
You know what this reminds me of? When we did the initial Kavaikis episodes, you were here when Greg brought in his different IPAs and the Voss and the Hornindal and that kind of thing. And the Voss in particular, which puts off a little bit of like an orange ester to it, how well that dovetailed in with the hops that he used. I think this one could be along the same lines. And this is just a beer that doesn't have those hops in it, but if they were there, I think that the yeast would prop up the hops.
Yes, and then this one, if you can see it, the color for American Blonde Ale is a little bit light, of course, or a little bit dark because of the muttons, using that English malt.
Yeah.
And the clarity is not, it's good, but it's not perfectly clear.
It says medium flocculation. I would say that this is powdery.
Yeah.
This is along the lines of USO5, which is tough to get out of suspension, you know. That doesn't make it a bad yeast
No,
for
but
beers that need to be clear. It just means you have to do extra work if you want it to be clear.
and if I were going to make a West Coast IPA, even with this little bit of bit of haze to it, I would have no problems at all.
Yeah, I'm with you.
It's within the range. And
I do get a little bit of spicy phenolic from this too, just a little
you're
bit,
getting peppery notes.
just a little bit. Yeah,
Okay, I'm not picking up as much.
peppery. I wouldn't say clove. I'd say just a slight pepperiness from it.
I get that, and for me, I get a touch of that lemon peel that they're
Yes.
talking about. That's
Yes.
the kind of not overly pithy, but to an extent, and that's what I pick up rather than the spice.
Well, the things you highlighted on this one, which are juicy citrus zest, which is hard to say, and lemon peel, that's exactly boom. Those two, right on the nose.
And when they told me that, that was my brain said, okay, let's go and make American Pale Ale, American IPA, and then I said, it's going to cover up what your yeast are truly trying to do, and I want to exploit. I want to see. Give me what it's going to do. And
well, see, this is one I agree with you on doing that, and my immediate reaction is I'd love to put this in a hoppy beer.
yes, me too.
With a lot of hop flavor. Because I think, man, it would make the hops pop. That's one of the things as a home brewer when you're trying to emulate some of the really great IPAs that pro brewers are putting out is how do you make the hops pop?
Yes.
How do you get them to be bright? And
a
I think
yeast can do that.
this can do that. Yeah,
a yeast can do that.
A yeast can
and
definitely
it
do that.
Just dries the heck out of this beer.
Yeah.
I was 1050, so for my mash, so it should have just came out right in that 1010 range. With the yeast saying it'll go up to 94, it took it a little lower than that.
Well, you
which
fermented at
excites me.
63, and their recommendation is 66 to 71. So that you may have added a point or two off of that if you had fermented a little bit warmer, or maybe even ramped it up some.
Yes.
You're like me. You like to live at 63.
I live at 63.
That's what I do too.
You're gonna have a hard time ever getting me off of it. It's common, and it's where I am. But that was also part of my method to the madness: is do as much as I can to what I'm used to.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm
Right.
used to doing 63. I'm used to doing very simple beers. I'm used to making them as close to style with as few ingredients as humanly possible, and so that way I could see what it's going to do, and then be able to give these guys true feedback on what I'm getting out of something that I'm accustomed to making. And if I were to do 2 or 3 changes, and we've talked about this on the show, don't do more than one change.
Right.
Make
One,
only
maybe
change.
2.
And so in these are recipes that the next one is very tried and true. I've made it many times, and it was the whole goal.
The next one's the one I was most excited when I looked at these. Yeah.
We'll tell you guys in just a few minutes after we ran on this one. Is just the whole goal was to take something that I know that I'm happy with,
Mm-hmm.
and then give it a different dynamic and see what it could do, but also make sure that we didn't do anything in the world that would overpower and take away from, the bread and butter of the characteristics. Rob talked quite a bit about. There's a few of the strains in that first beer. They've been very, very successful at making saisons. Now I know exactly why they've been very successful at making saisons. But in my opinion, I wanted to test. I wanted to see what's different. Why I didn't want to put it in something that, say, I'm going to make a saison because it comes out with all saison. Well, what fun is that? And in this situation, same thing.
That makes a lot of sense. Because for me, I love brewing saisons. I have 5 favorite saison yeasts, and you could add a couple tonight.
Now you might
both
have
of
6.
these, both of these would be fantastic for saisons. There is no shortage of great saison yeasts out there, and how you develop your grain bill to prop up whatever flavors those yeasts are creating. Is the fun part about brewing those. But you're right. You're not treading into new territory at all.
Correct.
What you're doing here is treading into a little bit of new territory and that's what I love about it is as simple as this recipe is, just 9 pounds of Muntons pale malt and 0.8 ounces of Cascade for 20 IBUs. It is just it's elegant and it's simple and it lets things come through. And I think it's the mistake that we made in our pale ales that we did for the Make Beer Again episode, is that we just, even with 2 malts, we still got a little too fancy,
Sometimes you do that.
There's something to be said for letting the base malt shine through, putting just enough hops in there to balance it out, and then letting the rest do the work, whether it's your flavor hops or your yeast or whatever,
Yeah. And when this one, I could see myself doing it again. For this yeast, my next goal on this one is to make a true West Coast style IPA.
Yes. Yes.
That's what I want to do with this yeast, and I'd love to be able to do it again. And maybe we can invite them on to a show and have them talking with us. It would be a lot of fun just to go a little further and do what they're saying is styles that really match. And I'll tell you, Brad, one of the fun parts was as I talked to them, they would give me characteristics, and I would say, "Has anybody done this?" And they'd say, "No." I said, "Well, I'm going to." And so we've got 3 styles that all fit that exact same. I'm going to, and so
see, in that first one, it screamed to me, I'd love to do a saison with this. I'd love to have wheat in it and see. This one, I agree with you. I'd love to do a hoppy beer with it. I think it could really prop up the hops and make them pop. This next one here is the one I'm most excited about for the night for a couple of different reasons.
Go ahead and introduce it.
One of them is that you brewed a best bitter, which is one of my favorite styles. I love English bitters. The other one is that when you look at their suggested uses on these, they're all over the place. So this is the El Monte Manor TCL R38, cultivated right in the heart of San Antonio. This strain is just as bright and as colorful as the beautiful city itself. Suggested use is Belgian Saison, Brett Saison. I don't know how you do a Brett Saison without Brett. Nordic ales, IPAs, alt beers, triples, and Belgian blondes. I mean, I don't know that you could cover more territory than that to go from alt beers to saisons to triples.
Well, and this yeast might pair up well with with Brett, adding some Brett to it.
So floral, bright white wine aroma with an earthy finish, and you highlighted earthy finish, and I agree that that's what pops to me too.
Yeah, when they said earthy finish, I said best
dirty
bitter.
English hops.
Yes, I've got one that has been tried and true. That's probably the beer that I've made the most. It is the one that has some of the best awards that I've won, and was pretty excited.
Love this recipe, by the way.
I keep it simple, and I use my best bitter, and I'm going to give it out to everybody. Yep, it's 8 pounds muttons with a half a pound of Cara wheat. So I've used Cara wheat in my bitters, all 3 of them, the ordinary, the best, and the SB. I think it does some fun, interesting changes to it. I like my best bitter to be a little less diacetyl, a little cleaner. We've got a fantastic guy that you guys know on this show very well, Nigel, that he actually took this recipe, and that's what started him off on making beer, and he likes to make them a little more diacetyl. And so when I heard this and I said, let's see what this is going to do. Started off with some Pilgrim, which is really just high alpha Fuggles. So it's got all the characteristics of Fuggles to bitter it up with. And then late, I always blend EKGs and Fuggles right at the finish. Pitched in right before I shut the flame off. Got it to get me about 36 IBUs, 1050, right at the top end of the best. And
there's some things about beers that remind me of seeing friends you haven't seen in a long time, and you get together and you just click. Like, I haven't seen this guy for 2 years, but you sit down and talk, and it's like you have been away from each other for a day or so. And that's what Fuggles and EKG hops are like for me. It's like, hey buddies, how's it going? And I remember you so well, and a beer like this, that's exactly what it's supposed to be.
Yeah.
Bitters to me are a social pub ale, And that's what I love about these hops and what I love about the approachability of these beers and all that. And
So
it's,
I'm on the other side with Fuggles and EKGs. They're my best buds. They sit on the couch and watch the game with me. I use them over and over
too.
and
Yeah.
over again. It's just one of my favorites.
EKG is a hop that I always have 4 or 5 ounces in my cooler.
Yeah.
I got Magnum, I got EKG. Those are the two that I always have. Fuggles, that's kind of a special occasion hop for me, you know, because there's just a few beers that they really shine in. But I love them.
see, for me, it's best bidder, best bidder,
Yep.
best bidder, best bidder, best bidder. Throw in an ordinary, throw in ESB, and then throw in some oatmeal stout 2 or 3 times a year. So let's see this one. I'm getting the ester profile is a little restrained.
It is a little restrained. I do get a bit of the white wine that they're talking about.
I get that. The earthiness isn't coming out as much. Maybe it's a little cool.
I actually pick up on some banana in this too.
Yeah.
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah. I get what you're getting. This is interesting. This is very different than what I'm accustomed to, and it's the yeast. And let's talk about what you're
Absolutely, yeah.
Because it's not diacetyl. It's not pulling the diacetyl. It's not putting your typical English style fruitiness. It is pulling a kind of winey note.
Now, to be fair,
I don't get the banana that you were picking up in the.
You don't get the banana, really?
I don't get it in the flavor. I'm getting a little bit of that winey note, and I'm getting that it's
definitely
bright.
get wine.
Yeah. I get it. I get a very bright note to it.
To me, it's softer and more rounded. It lets the malt come through, but it does have a wine character to it. That I think that is the one you highlighted earthy finish. I think after drinking it, I'd highlight white wine.
Oh, it's winey. Yeah,
Absolutely.
It's interesting. Where does that kind of fit? And what's interesting, a lot of beer styles don't necessarily come up with a winey note.
So to be fair, they did not suggest best bitter.
No, they didn't.
Or any type of English beer
No,
for
they
this.
didn't.
So let's put that out there. Now they did suggest alt beer, which is a very, very clean yeast profile, and also triple, which is a yeast driven beer. So you have the full gamut there. So I do get a ton of character out of this. I mean, here again, even though you've got hop flavor in this, and also you've got a little bit of caraway wheat in there, and kind of a bold base malt. It's all yeast driven.
Yes.
I think.
Without a doubt. I mean, traditionally when I make this, like I said, I keep it restrained. And I did. This is another one, 63 degrees. They talk about fermenting at 63 is the bottom end of the range. This actually has the lowest recommended yeast temperature range of all three.
Of all of them, 63 to 71. You did it at 63. Went from 1050 to 1013, so it's the lowest attenuation of any of them that you did. Excuse me. I want to be kind of brutally honest on this one.
Oh, yeah, please do.
This one to me reminds me of a lot of homebrewed saisons that I've had that are slightly under attenuated, a little bit sweet. And the yeast character kind of drives it, but it's not definitive. There's not a distinct yeast character to it. You know?
I feel exactly where you're talking there, and that's where, for me, I don't know that I would want to put this saison. I definitely don't know about Belgian blonde. I got a feeling that this is a yeast that does something very different than anything we see in any other style, and I think it needs more investigation, in all opinion. Taking my idea on this one and saying, where do we push other boundaries of different styles? Because truthfully, that whiny note doesn't fit many styles at all.
No, it doesn't.
the sweetness, like you said, stayed there, and you get that. So I wouldn't, and if I just simply adjusted and took out all the cara wheat, and then used this on 100% Pilsner, then yeah, maybe I may be pushing a little bit closer to a Belgian style beer, but that wine doesn't hit there either.
You ready for this?
Yeah,
Beer de garde.
it could be.
Beer de garde is
could
where I
be.
would put it. Here's what I think about this: is that it finished at 1013, was a little bit high, and that's why it reminds me a little bit of homebrewed saisons, where the saison yeast character I think gives a perception of sweetness, and homebrew saisons typically are not dried out enough, and so between the little bit too high finishing gravity and the sweetness from the yeast esters, it gives a perception of sweetness that I think that makes them seem under attenuated, even though they're not. 1013 is not that high.
No, but to me,
I'd love to see
those
this.
spices that I would expect there. That's why I say.
No, you're
this
right.
may
There's no
invent-
spices. Yeah.
This might invent something different.
So I'd like to see this in a very high alcohol.
That's a good idea.
10 or 11%, something along those lines, like a beer de
All
garde.
right, so is that well, maybe the challenge is
mash real low, add a little bit of dextrose to it, and let there be some kind of malt and alcohol. I think some alcohol flavor actually would mesh well with this.
I don't disagree at all. I think alcohol flavor with that winey note could do something very interesting.
Right.
I'd like to, and that's probably my next goal is definitely to take this one at about a 1080, 1090 gravity.
Yeah.
100% pills.
Yeah.
Nothing more than pills and nothing more than Magnum. I was hoping that earthy note came out. Yes, there may be some of that there, but it's restrained. It did,
and it's hard to tell if that's the Fuggles or not. I mean,
well, it could be, yes.
Fuggles is so earthy that
absolutely.
it could just be the hops. I
Absolutely.
agree with you on that part of it. I don't get a lot of the earthy character, but yeah, I like that idea, that 1080, 1090 range, and the wine character would mesh nicely with that, and maybe even some wood aging.
And we got
go well with
another 87 to 92% attenuation. There at a 1048, 1050, maybe 1050, so you can get enough still of that malt flavor. And then it'll dry that out to almost bone dry at a 1080 and still be very drinkable and see where the wine character goes.
What's interesting to me about this one is this is my least favorite of the three beers, but this is the yeast I want to try the most.
This is the one you want to try the most. I understand.
You know what I mean? Because I'd like to really push this one. I'd like to do a big beer with this one, and maybe even wood age it on some light toast, like American white oak or French oak or something like that.
And I agree with you, because we've said this kind of a minute ago, is the same thing. It's something that's truly different.
It really is.
It's taken beer into a whole different world, because we don't get it. It doesn't fit into any one of our traditional styles. And you guys know me. I am style driven. I want to be a purist, but I also, when you get me intrigued, how can we take and just nitpick something and really get that opportunity, and this yeast on a style that like I said, I love, and I enjoy drinking this one, because it's still, knock on wood. I was hoping, at least all of them come out clean, so we can truly show what the yeast is going to do.
All three of them on tap at my house, no problem blowing through the keg, no problem. In fact, the first two, I really liked a lot. Not that I don't really like this one. This one just is like, okay, here's what this yeast is now. Here's what I do different in the future, kind of thing. But I would blow through this keg, no problem at all.
If I would have tried this yeast in something else, I probably wouldn't have went that way.
Now I would say I would not brew an alt beer with this. I would not brew an IPA with this either.
Well,
but Belgian Saison, Brett Saison. Actually, if you were to do this and then add some bread on top of it, I think that would be really nice.
It might be fun. And in all truthfulness, you might, at a higher gravity, get all the way to a true Saison.
Yeah,
this
you're
may
right.
have all
No, you're
those
right.
same characteristics, and I mean, they've been doing this for a while. I took it as just a brand new one. Let's have fun and let's experiment. And I also had that 100% intent. I wanted to do something that they've not experienced before, and just to take it in a different direction with that openness. And like I said, it would had to be something with those parameters of simple, basic. Let the yeast do its job. Don't overpower it with anything else. That earthy note, it doesn't bring out enough of that diacetyl. Or enough of that traditional fruitiness that you would expect, which is why there's no way this truly fits as a best bitter, which is okay. I mean, that was the base, and that's okay because there's nothing in here.
They never claimed it was going to be a best bitter.
They never claimed that. They absolutely. James Lalonde said, "Hey, I'm going to give it a try," and of course that was after a homebrew club meeting, you have a couple beverages, and you get a little.
I love it, man. I love it,
and it's a lot of fun.
And that's really the spirit of what this show is supposed to be too. Is send us something that you were trying to do, and you'd like somebody to tell you, hey, here's what I get out of this, and what I think I would do next time. That's really the spirit of what we're trying to do. It's not necessarily here's my best foot forward. I've worked on this recipe for a long time, and I think this is my best beer, and here, what do you think? I mean, we'll take those too, for sure. We've had, actually, I think we've had plenty of those. We've had some really excellent beers on this show, but also it's the, hey, here's an idea that I'm working with, and I'm working through this, and here's my thought process behind it, and what do you think, and what would you do next? This is exactly what I really love to do.
And the fun thing is both you and I, we've enjoyed each one of these. We've enjoyed really what.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And then afterwards, what I did, like I said, I pigeonholed what I was going to do to a set style, and then see how it does with that, and where the yeast goes. I could then now say, okay, I'm giving you this. And you're like, well, yeah, that's like that very first beer. Say I'm giving you a low gravity, a session saison, and you might say, okay, well, this is good and drinkable and really enjoyable. And then the second one coming in the same way that I'm giving you a really citrusy, very low gravity American Pale Ale without the extra hops. And yeah, I get all that. So it sometimes it's about declaration. But what I will say is, Rob and Mary are doing some fun things down there.
I'm very impressed.
They have a total of 10, and so I've only had the opportunity to play with 3. I can guarantee you James Lalonde is going to play with more than just 3, because I want to have fun, and I want to do this same thing. I want to take their yeast and say, what do you get in the big characteristics? What are the buzzwords that hits me? And try to do something that's not listed in the suggested, because yes, they want to be able to, and there's a very good intent. They want to say, look, I'm going to give you a style that I think this will fit very well in, and make a good quality beer for that. And I'm sure that each one of those work well, but how do we keep pulling out all those different characteristics and dive in and push the envelope to say, could it work here? Again, this one, it doesn't work in an English bitter. It works in a really beautiful beer, but it doesn't work in an English bitter.
But this one really brings something truly unique that just intrigues me with the wine character. I keep going back to that because we did a collab with Martin House here where we did a beer that had wine must in it.
Yes.
The most expensive beer you'll ever brew.
So
and you're like, and mine came out like 14%.
That's the style that was in the back of my head. So as craft brew has gotten fun and really going out of the place, the Italians are making a grape ale, and so they're making a beer.
I like that
with grape must. And so, what if you did this with a 40% Chardonnay? Must, and then Pilsner malt is the other half the base.
On a homebrew level, it's a really expensive thing to do, but let me tell you, it's a lot of fun. We had a good time with it, and we used saison yeast on it because it handled that real high alcohol and attenuated really well, and it was a great beer. It kicked my ass every time I drank it. Well, but this, I think, brings that character to it without having the wine in it.
We may need to think about making that start off with about 1030 base on a Pilsner malt. Add
Well, that's the way to do
Chardonnay,
it.
add Chardonnay must. That's going to be, I mean, it's concentrated. So now we're up in the 1060, 1070 range.
Yeah, that would be much better than what we did. Which,
and then use this.
yeah,
Use this yeast. Yeah, we might have something fun to play around with. Might knock you off your socks too.
yeah, that's for sure. So, hey, I'd like to say something real quick here, because when we talk about these yeasts here and what we did here, this really reminds me of some of the wonderful things that that our good friend Greg has done, not only for our homebrew club over the years, but also for this show, where we would have things like this, where he would brew a beer and do 3 or 4 different yeasts on it and that kind of thing. And he did that more times than I can count. When it came to doing something like this, where we're like, let's explore all these different things, man, Greg stepped up and did it, and brought more education and information and just fun to all of us as his friends and the homebrew club and the show and everything. And if you haven't seen it on social media recently, Greg passed away last week. He had stage 4 stomach cancer and passed away last week. And, I'd just like to say that on a personal level, Greg was just an absolutely wonderful friend of ours, and he's going to be very dearly missed. And I hope that everybody who's out there listening can raise a glass to him and just thank him for everything that he did for this show and for the homebrew community as a whole around here, because I don't know, maybe you're the only other person I know who has contributed that much to the homebrew community.
Greg really was the glue that started this show and really brought it together. And,
Yep.
and we knew that for us, on a personal note, we knew that we had to bring this up. We hoped to do this last week, and there was no way we could have done the show last week. And,
right.
And bring it to you. This is the first show since we found that news, and it's tough. Wherever your thoughts may be in the whole spiritual world or not, it doesn't matter. At the end of the day, is he was a brother of ours that contributed to the show, contributed to the community, meant a lot to each one of us. Has become a wonderful, amazing dad, and if you ever get to know me personally, you're going to know that's one of my most cherished things in this world, is anyone that can be a wonderful dad. And that was something that Greg brought beyond homebrew and some of those other aspects of life that were out there. He was huge. He was huge to this show. Influential of getting us out here to do this show itself. And so to Greg, your family, I hope you're listening on us, and to Trish, we love you so very much. And I can't wait. In a couple of days, we're gonna raise a glass and continue to cheer you on, and who knows, we might raise a glass every time we do this show from here on out to the future, because we love you so very much.
Yeah, if the past week is any indication, I've got a lot more crying in my beer to do, because every day or so it hits me again, and I just can't say enough good things about the guy who was our very, very dear friend Greg. So everybody, raise your glass, say Prost, and I'm sure you're going to hear that a lot from us in the future. But this particular episode and playing around with these yeasts really struck me, because this is exactly his wheelhouse. This is what he would
dedicate. Let's dedicate this to Greg.
Absolutely.
And the Germans say Prost, and I'm going to close this episode out with what us Kunasses say is, hey!
Right on, man.